Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on moving to and living in Vienna. My name is Steve Amundson from the International Safeguards Project Office at Brookhaven National Lab. We have a great group of panelists here today with us, Americans who are currently working at the IAEA, who will be sharing some of their experience, insights, and suggestions for people who may be taking assignment for the IAEA or actually any international organization for that matter in Vienna, Austria. So looking at our agenda today, the main topics that we're going to be covering include considerations when you're moving to Vienna, some of the resources you have, housing, schools for kids. This include primary, secondary, higher education options for staff members or their spouses working in Vienna, transportation, spousal employment, and other resources and clubs that are available at the Vienna International Center. Also to clarify, the webinar today will not be discussing how our panelists got their jobs, how to get a job, or specific situations. There are several recorded webinars by the IAEA on the recruitment process, which is available for viewing on the IAEA's website or through our website at Brookhaven. Our panelists today include members of the Americans and International Organizations in Vienna Club, whose current president is Marina Kisembo, who will speak about the club.
Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome everyone about the club. The club is Americans in International Organizations. It provides a platform for Americans who are. It provides a platform for Americans who are here in Vienna International Organizations. It provides a networking opportunity. It provides a hub for where you can be able to contact people who are American and also have the same background as you, and provides different events, St. Patrick's Day, 4th of July. So it's a great organization.
Okay. Thank you, Marina. At this time, I'd also like the rest of our panel to introduce themselves. Whoever wants to go first.
Sure, I'll go.
Okay.
My name is Lisa
Sorry.
Stevens. I've been here since June of 2019. I'm the director of the Program of Action for Cancer Therapy in the Technical Cooperation Department. Over.
Great, thank you, Lisa.
Okay, I'll go next. Yeah, my name is Maikael Thomas. I work for the Department of Safeguards, the Division of Scientific and Technical Services in the surveillance team. And I work on deep learning algorithms in order to increase the productivity of inspectors and technicians doing video surveillance review.
All right, thank you, Maikael. Reagan?
Sure, I can jump in. My name is Reagan Aylmer. I work for the Department of Nuclear Applications. I've lived in Vienna since 2015, and I'm currently a junior professional officer here.
Okay, thank you. And Rebecca?
Hey everyone, I'm Rebecca Krentz-Wee. I'm also in Safeguards Technical Services in the Non-Destructive Assay Group as another JPO. And I'm the newest one, so I arrived at the beginning of January. So I'll be talking a bit about the transition right now and what it's like during the pandemic.
Thank you. And Marina, also as you are the president of the Americans in International Organizations in Vienna, but you're also a staff member.
So yes, I'm also a staff member. I started in 2018. I'm a junior professional officer in the Department of Safeguards. But my background is software engineering, and I work on updating Safeguard software.
Great, thank you very much. All right, so moving to our next slide here, there are several considerations you should probably make when deciding where you want to live when in Vienna, which Reagan, if you could please discuss a little bit further from your experience.
Sure. So I was excited to have this slide because for me, it's the easiest one to sell. Vienna has been rated one of the highest quality of life cities in the whole world for 10 years in a row now. So it's not just my own opinion that the city is great to live in. Lots of other people agree. One of the reasons I think that it has such a high quality of life is there's lots of green space. So I am an avid runner, and this is the best city I've lived in to get marathon training in. 50% of the city is covered in green spaces. One of the considerations you'll have living here is what type of building you want to live in and where you want it to be located. In my experience, a lot of people who work for the international organizations like to take advantage of living in the city center. Housing is comparatively cheap, but compared to a lot of American style apartments, it is a bit smaller. So you have to be kind of careful with how much stuff you bring with over here. If you do choose to live in the city center, you'll find that it's super easy to get around on foot or on bike. And a lot of the items that you need, so grocery stores, bakeries, these things will be located in your neighborhood. So there's no need to drive to a central business district. The city's kind of laid out in a very kind of organic way that allows you to make the most of your neighborhood. Vienna has 23 districts. Most people live in districts 1 through 9, I would say, and each one of these districts has a distinct personality. So you can kind of customize your experience in the city. So I hope that was a helpful overview.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. You said you were training for the marathon. Did you actually run the marathon in Vienna?
I did. So I've done it 2 times, but unfortunately last year it was canceled due to COVID, but it's coming up in September. So anyone that's listening who's a runner, you've got time to make it over here.
And we're also going to be talking about the runners, one of the clubs. There's a runners club. Are you a part of that club?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. So we'll talk about that in a minute as well. Anybody else have some thoughts about the city, about living there and things to keep in consideration? Okay, no problem. We'll just move on to the next slide.
Okay, sounds great.
All right, so just very quickly here, before Michael, I'll hand it over to you. The vast majority of international recruited staff members to the IAEA and those coming to Vienna are going to be renting an apartment. There are houses, of course, but by far and large, you're going to be living in an apartment. So Michael, can you go over some of your experience and a few items about renting?
Yeah, and this is really a tough one. I mean, you could, there's so much to it. You could cover, easily 20 or 30 minutes. So I'll try to do this as much justice as I can, but I found there's an incredible amount of creativity used by people that come over here. And once I actually got over here, I had my strategy when I came. I talked to others, and I found that others had a completely different strategy for finding a place in the short term versus having an apartment in the longer term. And so what a lot of people do is they will find a temporary place, that's fully furnished, because you have to consider that when you have your stuff shipped over here, there's going to be some amount of lag time. Even if you have some of it shipped over in an airplane, that's potentially one of the benefits, depending on what kind of contract you have. All of that has to clear customs, and that can take at least a month, and more likely 2 months. It's so complex, and so many things can happen. And so some people, they rent a furnished place, for a certain amount of time. Some people go into hotels actually, or do Airbnbs. And that's actually the route that I tried. I actually got kicked out of my place because I didn't anticipate how long it would take to find my more permanent place and actually get that secured. But I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. You just have to think about what you want to do. And some people even, get their longer term place sight unseen, and they just sign the lease. And then what they do is they come over here, they'll bring an air mattress with them or borrow it from somebody and kind of camp out in their place as best they can, kind of living off of the kindness of colleagues until their stuff actually shows up. So that's something to think about. As it says here in the slide, there's the Vic Housing Service. That's a fine service because that's a listing of housing that's kind of approved through the United Nations system. The contracts that you would sign with the landlord are kind of more standardized, and they have language in them that would protect you from certain things that could happen if you went and kind of did it on your own. Now, that being said, the amount of inventory that you would find through that service is a lot less than if you just go out on your own. And as it says, in the slide, also if you use the Big Housing Service, there's certain fees that you wouldn't have to pay, such as an agent's fee. So even if you're renting a place, you will almost always have to go through an agent and probably pay, I think it's about 2 months of rent, of which the IAEA will reimburse part of that. But that's just a consideration to have. So it's sort of this trade-off, and whatever it is you want. So yeah, there's all sorts of online listings if you want to go on your own. There's a really good one called Willhaben that's not actually listed here, that has all sorts of interesting things to look at. And of course, the bulletin board at work is good. So if you do go out on your own, what I will say, since this is what I did, there was, you can actually take the rental contract to an office at the IAEA, and they will actually vet it for you and give you helpful language that you can put into the contract, and that will help protect you. So that's highly recommended if you decide to go on that route. As Reagan was saying in the previous slide, there is this, there's this like subsidy. The rents here are a fairly good deal, but based on what you come over here as, basically your grade and your step, there is a subsidy to help you out, but it doesn't kick in until a certain number of euros, until you paid that certain amount yourself. And so you have to kind of use this formula and figure out what it is. And so if your rent just falls below that, you don't get any subsidy at all. So it's almost like there's this incentive to get something a little nicer, but the downside is that the subsidy will start decreasing after an amount of time. So you'd want to factor that in as well. So maybe one last thing I'll say is that a lot of the things you might expect or that you're used to in US housing, you may not necessarily find here. For example, there's no you'll just find dangling light bulbs. You'll have to buy sconces for those. They don't tend to have closets in apartments here, not a lot of them at least. And so you will have to buy wardrobes or armoires. Baking sheets that might fit in US-sized ovens would not necessarily fit in the ovens here. So there's all these kind of little things that you might not consider. But it's always good to talk to somebody before you come over, and we can all help you with that sort of thing. So I'll just kind of leave it at that.
All right, thank you, Maikael. Anybody else want to add anything to it from their experience?
Steve, I will. This is Lisa. Just to say, so I agree with Maikael about having a strategy. I will say that my strategy did involve using an agent because I was bringing my family, so my husband and my 2 teenage boys, and there were some very specific things that we wanted in the apartment. One of them being enough bedrooms for us, and also we wanted air conditioning. And so those were, that I couldn't find through the Vic housing. I did look at Vic housing, but I wanted some things that maybe were atypical. So we did use an agent, and we're very happy with that. And just to say that we also did get renter's insurance. So we went through the Generali, which has an office here in the building, and I arranged for that. And I also did have an Airbnb. I came over alone for the first 6 weeks because it was over the summer, and I didn't want to have 2 teenage boys here with no friends in a small place. So they came over, and we moved then when our stuff arrived into our permanent place.
Thank you, Lisa. There's one quick question I just want to get on this topic, but typically I'll have all the questions at the end. We'll have a Q&A. But did anybody have any pets that finding a place you had to take in consideration?
I have 2 cats, and it is something you have to consider, but Austrian law protects the renter much stronger than the owner of the building. So there's a lot of times apartments will have clauses that forbid small household animals, but as I understand it, according to Austrian law, this actually isn't enforceable. But I do know that a lot of apartment owners prefer that you don't have them, but the side of the kind of Austrian regulations allows you to have small animals. So it could be a headache if it's something you have to negotiate. As I experience it, Vienna seems to be a very pet-friendly city, and I haven't encountered any difficulties personally.
Great, great. I guess, I mean, the final thought on it is if you have questions, if you go outside of the VIC housing service, it's recommended that if you have a contract, to bring it to them, because they will look at it for you without charge to make sure that everything that the contract has is up to code or it's allowable by law in Austria. So it's important. I highly recommend that you do that. Anybody who's going to Vienna. Okay, so moving on to our next slide, talking a little bit about the schools. Lisa, you said you had a couple teenagers who are in school, and I believe, Michael, you do as well. So I'll let you both talk about your experience in having school-age children in Vienna.
Sure. So we transitioned a 8th grader and a 9th grader to start school in Vienna in the fall of 2019. So we actually ended up choosing Vienna International School. And as noted on the slide here, it's very near the VIC. So it's just 2 more U-Bahn stations on the U1. And so that's very convenient for us. We also, again, liked it because it has the International Baccalaureate program. And they were very amenable to a tour when I came over for my in-person interview. And there's a PTA. So even though it's a Vienna International School, there is a PTA that I think was initially set up by Americans. So I don't know, Michael, if your children are at a different school, but it's a good parent community, and we're getting involved with the 2 different groups of grade parents, the PTA and the board as well.
Yeah, Lisa. Yeah, so I came over here in the summer of 2018, and my daughter was 8 at the time and went into 2nd grade. We went to the American International School, so she's enrolled there. It's a beautiful campus. It's right on the edge of Vienna, so you literally drive through vineyards on the way there. And it's I think, yeah, quite different, stylistically than like the Vienna International School. Not that it's better or worse necessarily. It's just it's more of an American style education. So that could be an advantage for someone who wants to put their kids back into the public system in the United States. It's just something to consider, although I doubt there would be a problem with any of the other schools either. I think, so far we're quite happy with it. It seems to be a dedicated staff. It provides very comprehensive, holistic education, and the teachers seem very dedicated to me from what I've seen so far. I would say one disadvantage, especially compared to the Vienna International School, is that it is quite far from work, and so this is something to consider if you have school-age children. So when I said the edge of town, it really is the edge of town, and so it can take quite a while to get out there or get to work based on where it is you decide to live. But I do believe there are good places in town that serves as kind of a maybe you could see it as a best of both worlds between both locations, and it really all depends on what it is that you want. But there's no wrong answers. And I'll just also add to this that there are other international schools as well. There's like the Amadeus School, that's kind of an arts and music school. There's the Danube School, which is actually very close to the Prater, so it's very kind of like near like very nice green spaces. And then I think this is especially true if you have children that are kind of at the kindergarten age. It might be worth considering to put them into the kindergarten here, because then they will really be integrated in with just the other like local children. It's a great way to like pick up German, almost for free. The cost is quite low because of the subsidies provided from the states. And you know, a lot of our colleagues have decided to take this route with their children, and then they keep their kids in the public schools up to some certain point, and sometimes they'll transfer them to an international school at that point. So that's yet another thing that that is done, and there are, you know, kind of nice bilingual, you know, German English bilingual schools here as well. So, you know, besides that, you know, yeah, there is a pretty, I think, very nice tuition reimbursement scheme that's offered by the agency. You know, I think we end up paying around 80% of the tuition, or sorry, 80% of it is subsidized, which is nice because the tuition is quite expensive. So it doesn't make it so so unreasonable to send your children there.
Thank you, both of you, Lisa and Michael. That's one thing we're not, don't have a slide on, is talking about the daycare. There are a lot of options in Vienna. There is a daycare center on the premises of the Vienna International Center, though it can be difficult to get your children in there because of the high demand. But outside of that, there are a lot of bilingual ones and other international ones. And so if you do have questions, any of our listeners, about daycare and what's available, we encourage you to reach out to the IAEA, reach out to our office at Brookhaven or Argonne's office. We'd have a lot of information to help you kind of do a little bit of search for that. And plus, we can get you connected with people currently working in Vienna who have children that are a daycare age as well. Another thing we're not talking about specifically is tuition at universities. There is a sliding scale similar to there is for K through 12 tuition. There's also a ceiling set for each country that the child will be going to. And reimbursement for tuition is also only available up to, I believe, the 4th year of university studies. So any children that might be graduate school, unfortunately, that will be on their own. All right, so looking at the higher education, this is mostly for information for any staff members who are interested in post-secondary education in Vienna itself, rather than for their children, but also could be for their children, that there are several options. There are many, University of Vienna, there's a technical university in Vienna, there's a diplomatic academy. A lot of them do teach in German, most of the coursework, but there are many options as well as in English. Now with the pandemic, there's a proliferation of online programs, which is now an excellent option for many people who are in Vienna. There are other resources for the Expat Center that can provide information about other programs. And one notable university that is in Vienna is the Webster University, which teaches all its courses in English, and it's accredited by Webster University, which is based in St. Louis, Missouri. They don't have any of the STEM coursework. It's more focused on business, psychology, and international affairs. All right, so now let's imagine you've gotten an employment offer, you've accepted, and now you have to start deciding what to pack, what to bring with you to Vienna. Now, Rebecca, you were the most recent arrival to Vienna that went through this, so can you share your thoughts on what to do, what not to bring?
Yeah, so I reached out to some of the friends I knew who were over here, and the top 2 things were make sure you have enough adapters and converters for any electronic devices you want to bring, and then also make sure you have prescriptions and over-the-counter meds. Obviously, it's possible to get those here, but they're much more expensive. And then a note on kind of the electronics. So this slide mentions that lamps work with an adapter. Most computers, laptops, modern electronics, phone chargers are dual power supply. So you should just work with an adapter, though you might need a switch. You can usually look on appliances and see whether they're rated right for 110 volts versus 220 or 240. The thing is, even if you get a converter, not all appliances work well even with the converter. So usually things that have heating elements or kind of blades, so right, it mentions blenders and blow dryers, fans, those don't tend to work. So you shouldn't really bother bringing them. A note on the cell phones. So plans are much cheaper here. I brought my cell phone and then got a SIM card. So as long as your phone, you need to make sure your phone is unlocked and will work kind of in the European network. But as long as you can, there are prepaid SIM cards, which I just picked up on my first day in the city. And then you can look at contracts. They are much cheaper and kind of better than some trying to transfer a plan. I think when we were talking earlier, no one here brought a car or motorcycle. The registration and moving is difficult. So I think that also comes up on the transportation slide. But what else? Oh, it also mentions bringing tools, just because if you bring things, if you bring like furniture or whatever that gets shipped over later, you want to make sure you have the correct tools and the units that you need to have. I think those are the main things that kind of were recommended to me and that I made sure to do. So.
There is an option for new hires to store some of their items in the United States before having a partial shipment coming over. Did you do that, Rebecca?
I did not. So I was in grad school before this, and so I didn't have much stuff. I was in Berkeley, California, so in a very small apartment with not many things. So I have an air shipment. So I brought with me 2 suitcases and a backpack, and that's kind of all the stuff I have. I'm in an Airbnb.
You are right out of grad school.
Yeah, I got my PhD in December.
Wow. Lisa, what about you? You had 2 kids, and so that probably had a little more accumulation of items back home. Did you bring in everything, or did you store? What did you do in your case?
So we kept our house in the US, and so we still have some furniture at home, but since I knew what apartment we were going to get and how many bedrooms we would have and space, I had a sense of what to pack when we did the official shipment. So that was really helpful.
And Michael, I think you did the same.
Yeah, we didn't take it. Actually, I came over here as staff, and so my initial contract did not give me an option to store anything, and so we actually used it as an opportunity because it's so trendy right now to downsize, and yeah, we actually just kind of made a guess as to what would be the right amount of furniture. And then, just, consigned the rest that we just weren't as attached to. And it worked out pretty well for us.
Right. Yeah, you bring up a very good, important point that there are a lot of different kind of contracts that the IAEA offers. So it's regular staff, temporary assistants, extra budgetary, CFE, JPOs. Make sure you look at the contract that you have, the annexes, to see what your entitlements are. Especially when it revolves how much you can ship over, if you have that a storage allowance, because depending on the type of contracts, those things will vary. So it's important to keep that in mind. Okay, so when you're thinking about getting around the city and commuting to work, one thing Vienna is widely known for, which I hope the rest can agree here, that Vienna has an excellent public transportation system, one of the best in the world. So would anybody like to share about their experience, how much the costs are for public transportation, a little bit about the system itself?
I'm happy to jump in. So I'm a huge fan of Vienna's public transportation system. I follow them on Instagram. I think they're brilliant. It costs €1 per day if you buy the annual kind of Jahreskarte, so annual subscription. And if you buy your rides kind of on a per ride basis, it's still €2.20, I think, for an adult to ride. So it's based on the trust system. When you enter the public transportation system, there's no one that's going to check your ticket right away. And I think in the last maybe year, I've gotten checked by kind of undercover ticket checkers one time. So people are very proud to buy their tickets, I think, when they kind of enter the public transportation system. And the Viennese are incredibly proud of their public transportation system. That being said, as mentioned before, if you live in the inner city, you don't find yourself having to use it that much. I love biking to work, so it takes me about 25 minutes, and I live on the other side of Vienna. And it's a beautiful ride. So you bike past all of these gorgeous buildings, you see history the entire time you're riding out here. And then you cross the Danube River and you enter into Vienna's only kind of modern part. So we have 3 skyscrapers out here, and it's really like entering a different world. You kind of leave the 15th century on that side of the Danube and you enter into modernity here at the VIC. So I highly recommend choosing bike or public transportation because you'll save time. My friends who have a car say that they spend more time looking for a parking space than they actually spend driving to their destination, wherever they are. So it's something to consider.
Thanks, Reagan. That I remember from my experience, I did live in Vienna myself as well. I originally lived up the 10th district, which is kind of on the other side of the city center from work. And I had a small child. I would bike to work. It was perfect. You could follow bike paths all the way from the 10th district into work. I had my son in the back seat behind me, taking him into daycare. So it's great. You're going through old parts of the city. You cross over the bridge, as you said. Sometimes I wear a suit, and sometimes I regret doing that because I get a little bit sweaty, but there is showers if anybody needs to afterwards once you get there to, once you drop off your bike and go into the buildings.
Stephen, can I just add one thing about there's also a student pass for the annual pass, and I'm not going to remember the exact amount, but I think it's 80 euros a year for students. So they ride it, and you buy them an annual pass as well. So it's so affordable, and it's also not, in addition to being well managed, it's also very safe. And so again, we came from Maryland, so just outside of DC, and I would never let my kids ride the metro by themselves. That's just me. But here they will go out and meet friends. And I mean, COVID, it's very different now, but it's very safe. I don't have any concerns when they're on the U-Bahn alone as teenagers.
I did recall seeing many small kids riding the U-Bahn themselves to class, so it's not unusual given the good public transportation system plus the safe city itself, but that's not uncommon. I think everybody in our panel does not have a car, so if you do need a car for whatever reason, there are many short-term, for like a short-term need or for a weekend getaway vacation, there are many rental car companies in Vienna to choose from, pretty reasonable prices. If you do intend to buy a car while in Vienna, which is probably more recommended than actually shipping one over given the hassles, the IAEA does offer a tax-free car purchase once every few years, which depends on your status, if you're diplomatic status or not. The taxes that are excluded are the value-added tax, the VAT, as well as some emissions. Be careful though, if you do resell it, some of those taxes, especially the emissions one, might need still to be paid at some point. Another thing about the cars, if you do have one there are two sets that are required, winter and summer, or an all-season tire, which has the M+S rating. Another thing to keep in mind too is apartments generally do not have free parking spots. If they have a garage, you got to pay for that. Or if you outside parking, you still might have to pay for that. There is street parking available. Many districts require permits in order to do so. And of course, trying to find a spot near where you live can be tricky. You might have to park a few blocks away. So hopefully you're not bringing a bunch of bags from the commissary with you home. You might have to walk a couple blocks just to get to your apartment. So if you can get by without a car, I mean, it's safe to say that we recommend don't have a car while you're in Vienna, especially if you're only there for a couple years for your assignment. All right, so moving on to spousal employment. This is a subject that many people who have questions about. So if you do have a spouse, it can be a challenge. According to the IAEA's agreement with the Austrian government, spouses of staff members do not automatically receive work permits to work in the Austrian companies or any multinationals. You can work at the IAEA, spouses can work at the IAEA or any of the other international organizations, as long as they're not a direct line of supervision, one over the other. And typically they prefer or wish to have a spouse working outside of the section of their spouse. One silver lining, I guess you could consider the pandemic, as remote work has become much more prevalent, and having a spouse to continue working with an American-based company is much more likely a probability. So if a spouse is not planning on working, there are options he or she can pursue while in Vienna, such as the higher education. As I mentioned, there are the several universities in Vienna, or of course, online education too. Volunteering, many different opportunities for that. Language skills, German language courses are available within the VIC as well as outside of private companies. And as Regan was saying, the city is very green, so get out there, run, do something, pick up some different hobbies. There are a lot of opportunities to just get immersed in the Austrian culture and living there as well. So do any of you have any spouses that are working in Vienna or working remotely or from the United States?
Yeah, Steve, I was going to say that this is something that my wife has been interested in pursuing. So we have gone down the road a little bit.
Yep.
And it with a little bit of work, it is possible for her to access the Austrian market. It seems to be related to as long as you are not in a super saturated industry, it's sort of like a lot of countries have. And as long as you're not kind of taking a job away in a certain sector, but she does have access to that, and I don't know that that's super well enforced, but I do know people, spouses that have gone and worked at like the international schools, for example, like you said, other international organizations, and even those outside of the UN. NGOs, for example, I've seen lots of examples of that, or even people opening their own businesses, but it sounds like it's quite a lengthy process. So it would be the kind of thing that you would do if you were really going to be here for a long time.
Good tips, good advice. All right, so moving on to some miscellaneous items. One I would like to speak about is about moving to Vienna in the middle of a pandemic. So Rebecca, as you're the most recent one, can you explain your experience doing this?
Yeah, so I will caveat with things are changing all the time. New regulations just went into effect or are about to go into effect, so do make sure to check things. My experience and what is currently the case is if you so there are exceptions for people traveling on business. So you are allowed in the country. There are currently restrictions. No one is allowed for tourism. But so as long as you state that you are traveling on business, and you'll probably have to tell them not only at customs, but when you book an initial hotel or things like that to have proof that you're traveling. And IAEA HR will help you like with a letter to say, that you're traveling on business, and you can just show that as proof. In terms of testing, there's a couple different options. If you're able to get a test and have results from within 72 hours of landing in Vienna, that's one option of kind of like the medical paperwork that they'd want to see. If you don't have that, you are required to do a quarantine. The quarantine is 10 days long, but after the 5th day, you can go and get a test, and if the test results are negative, you can end quarantine early. There's a number of testing places around the city, including a few free ones, which you can access as someone who can work who is working in Vienna. I would probably tell anyone to put an extra week of travel in between landing and your first day needing to report into the VIC, just because, who knows what regulations will be if you're, planning a couple months out. But in my case, it was fairly straightforward. There's also, if you want to make sure kind of that you're landing. So I wanted to make sure that I could like go get groceries before I was in my Airbnb for the first week. And so I did there's a rapid testing at the Vienna airport that you can get. So, right, just in terms of calculating incubation periods and how long in quarantine and what the risks are. So there's a number of options for rapid testing in Vienna once you get here. And there was something else, and now I've forgotten what it was. I guess just on the kind of add some extra time. Particularly, I was unable to get a COVID test before I left the US because the testing places in my county were all a 3 to 5 day wait time. Yeah, it's an interesting time. And
yeah, it is. So hopefully your experience is not going to be like everybody else's experience, and the vaccines will be widely available, and it's going to be over sooner than later. But yeah, if anybody's going over the next 6 months, this is something that you should really plan on. If you have questions about it, you can reach out to us as well as we can get you in contact with others. And Austrian, they have regulations we can read as well. So it can be done basically. So don't be too afraid to be moving over in the middle of a pandemic. So
I remembered one more thing.
Okay, go for it.
So there were a couple other people who also started in January, and apparently one person had trouble. He had a connecting flight where the layover was in Europe, and the customs people checking tickets were confused about what visa he needed, and so he was actually turned away in Amsterdam and unable to continue the second leg of his flight. So I flew I flew from San Francisco to DC to Vienna. And so having, I think, a direct flight from the US to Vienna might be recommended, just because sometimes explaining to people that, no, you don't need a visa and you're traveling on business is a valid reason to go, apparently is confusing sometimes to explain.
Good point. Yeah, if you can get that direct flight from the United States into Vienna, which is from DC, Chicago, New York, and I think there's another location or two. Try to do that if you can, any travelers. All right, so the next next topic here in the miscellaneous is about leave of absences from national laboratories. We do have a lot of people who are working at the IAEA who came from a Department of Energy National Lab. Maikael, you did yourself, so I'd like to, if you could, explain a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so I come originally from Sandia National Laboratories in New Mexico. And so at the time that I came over here, there had been some people that had been coming to the agency, but not like a whole lot. There are some like laboratories, where there's more people. So I felt like there wasn't a whole lot of people that I could ask. But there, I think with every national laboratory, there's some kind of a precedent. And I feel like all laboratories encourage people to go over. And so it really depends on the kind of benefits that you have when you leave the laboratory. So I think one of the big things is whether you are on a pension, you have a pension type of benefit, or if you only have the 401k, that type of thing. And that really determines what kind of agreement they will make with you. So I was like on a pension system. And in my case, Sandia will give you an initial 3-year like special leave of absence, and then at that point, traditionally you were expected to come back. The problem is, whether you're staff or a CFE or whatever, they all have different amounts of time in which they can potentially last. So as a CFE, you can stay here pretty easily about 5 years, for example. So. I made a deal with them where they would, kind of give me years of service for the first 3 years, but any time that you stay after that would, you can come back to your job, and that's kind of the big thing, and you will be able to sort of maintain your benefits like where you left them off. But yeah, like for me, like anything after that was not going to be like counted towards a year of service. But that's a decision that you have to make with the laboratory. And some laboratories are very good about allowing people to extend past an initial 3 years. And others seem to be, kind of very dogmatic about having people like come back at exactly 3 years. And so you have to kind of check with your individual laboratory. I know like Los Alamos is especially good about, or they have been at least, letting people kind of stay, up to 7 years, and then having a mechanism to come back and kind of reintegrate in. So, I just really, recommend, kind of asking a lot of questions, understanding what it is, what is entailed in the agreement that you're making, and what it's going to be like when you come back. Are you going to be coming back to the same position, to the same salary, to the same benefits? And is there a plan to help you integrate back in when you come back? And maybe that's also getting help, from the NNSA with some kind of funding to get you started. But as opposed to just kind of, yeah, like, okay, I'm back and I have this theoretical position, but I don't know what I'm going to do, and there's nothing kind of set up for you. So it's really, really important to kind of think about that before you go, and then before you come back, really start talking with managers and other people that you know, and kind of setting that up, and seeing if if you do something at the IEA, could that work somehow be continued in another form, like when you come back.
Thank you. Yeah, just want to emphasize that there is no Department of Energy wide policy in place for all the national laboratories when it comes to leaves of absences. Every lab has their own. So it's very important that you look in advance and speak with the right people, especially at line management, about any leaves you're going to take and in the process afterwards. So next item in here is about home and family leave. So those that are not familiar with home leave, this is where in the second year of your assignment, you're given a lump sum for travel back to your home country, which is in our cases, our panelists for the United States. And has anybody taken home leave yet? From our panelists. All right, Marina, can you explain how that works?
Sure. So after your 1 year of service, you're entitled to a home leave back to where to your location. And in my situation, I was recruited out of Washington, D.C. So that was what was put as my location, but that was not my home leave. My home leave was Minnesota. So one thing that's very important as soon as you get to the agencies for you. So I realized that closer to the time I had to take home leave. One thing I think that's really important is for you to make sure you do the paperwork that's necessary. So talk to HR and do the paperwork that's necessary that start to change your home leave, because what you have to show is that you have a ticket that took you back to your home. So in my situation, it was Minnesota. And when I had to change it, I had to show that, that I did go to Minnesota. And also that also affects how much you would get for home leave and also how many days you would get off. So depending on how long the travel is. So for DC, it would have been 1 day. And then for us, 1 travel day, and Minnesota was 2 travel days. So that's very important in deciding, in establishing what exactly is your home once you arrive.
So to clarify, you receive your days for travel. Those are an entitlement you receive, plus a lump sum, and then anything in between. So depending on how long your vacation is going to be, you're using your own personal annual leave in between. Is that how it works?
Yes, correct.
Okay, great. All right. The last item here on the miscellaneous is about taxes. As a U.S. citizen, you are going to have to file a tax return. Doesn't mean you'll pay taxes, but you still have to do it regardless. So those that have been there long enough, who has filed taxes? Maybe not for this past 2020, but maybe 2014?
Yep, I have.
Okay. What is the agency's role in any kind of tax returns you do?
The agency's role. So one thing, before I answer that, one thing I think that's really important once you get to the agency is to find out when there is the tax seminar. So there's a tax seminar organized by the agency for American citizens, because we're the ones who have to file for taxes. So that's one thing that I do advise everyone to do that. But in the agency's role is to help you. Not really do your taxes for you, but to help you with any documentation that you would need. So at the end of every year, you would get a document of how much your income was. That way, it's like your tax return, let's say, and you use that to file your taxes. And also for people who have, depending on also the agency also reimburses you for any taxes that you have paid. Because it depends on how taxes work. You're under the foreign earned income exclusion. So if your income goes above the foreign earned income exclusion, the agency will help you pay that back. And you can easily go through. You may not think that you could easily go over that. You can easily go over that. Let's say if you left your job or the moving expenses. So everything that the agency would do for you while you're moving here, that's also there's a monetary value attached to that. So they'll be included in your tax return.
Right, and it's important to know too that the IAEA, they have a tax consultant. They're not going to do a tax preparation for you. That's something that you have to do on your own. They provide you information about that, but they are not doing tax preparations. And also the compensation you receive, I think every late January or so, you receive like a sheet that provides all the details about your compensation. That's what you use for your tax return. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Can I just add something, Stephen? I only have 1 year of experience with filing my taxes, but it was a year in which from January to June, I was receiving a salary in the US, and then June to December. So I would just recommend actually that if you have a tax preparer, you talk with them when you're leaving and make arrangements for how you could continue to use them to prepare your taxes. I know there are even some tax services here that will do it. I think it's quite expensive. I have someone who I'd been using for many years in the US who helped me, and I provided all the documentation. So that was, I felt, a tricky year in that transition year when there was US income and then foreign income.
Yes, the tax man always cometh here. All right, so moving on. This is about the different things that are, this isn't a typical situation, not in the pandemic. Many of these services will be available to staff members and others that are working at the International Center. Maikael, could you just briefly explain a little bit of what's available to them?
Yeah, so yeah, the Vienna International Center is a really interesting place. I mean, there's several UN-based organizations there, and so it's like a little, I guess, miniature city that you can go into, and they provide a lot of services. Especially important that you can speak English at any of these places inside, where that isn't necessarily true on the outside. But it's just, kind of, and it's also a convenience thing. You can be at work and there's services like banking or dry cleaners, a post office, for example. And yeah, it's a really nice way to like kind of simplify your life. The pharmacy is also really nice. If you have a prescription or you're just looking for something, they're very helpful to diagnosing things. And of course, we've all heard about the commissary. This is where, especially if you're missing things from back home, this is an opportunity to buy some US-based goods and also goods from other parts of the world without duty or tax. So you can actually get some very good prices in there. But yeah, if you want American-based Lucky Charms, you could get that there, for example. So yeah, it's nice. It's a nice opportunity. If you're feeling a bit nostalgic, I guess. There's also, kind of more social opportunities. There's a nice, during normal times, there's a bar that you can go into, have a coffee, or, later on you could go have a drink with colleagues. And also like, exercising during the lunch hour, you could go, there's a locker room where you can change, and showers, things like that. So yeah, you can see there's a whole array of things, maybe something that, an important thing that I would recommend when you come is to sign up for language classes. Some people will tell you that everybody here speaks English. That's not true. And I think even speaking a little bit of German is very helpful to how interactions will go. And I think people really appreciate it if you try. So I really recommend at least learning just a little bit if you come here. It just makes the experience so much nicer. And I'll just kind of finish off by saying I think that during COVID times, the services have been impacted in kind of interesting ways. At some points, these services have been completely shut down, or their hours have been altered, or they might limit the number of people, for example, inside the commissary at a given time. So normally in normal times you would just show up and do your shopping, and now you have to sign up for a time slot, and kind of prove that you've signed up for this as you go in, and you have to wear a mask as you go in. Pretty soon they're going to be changing that to the FFP2 style mask as restrictions increase here a little bit. So things are constantly changing with COVID. Maybe one of the saddest things is, we're not getting the normal visitors for meetings, and family members can't come in right now. So a lot of those nice social things, or even getting together with colleagues is harder. A lot of those nice social things are a bit on hold right now, but I have a lot of faith that they'll be coming back soon.
Yeah, you can only do so many Zoom virtual happy hours with colleagues. It gets a bit old. It's not quite the same as having it in person. So that's Absolutely. One thing I'm sure a lot of people miss. So.
Yeah, it's, people say it's maybe 50% of the work, right? Is just talking to people and getting those ideas. It's really important.
Right, absolutely. So moving on to the next subject, we're talking about the social aspect of what's available in the different services. There are a lot of different clubs and other outlets people can get together in normal circumstances, of course. So Reagan, could you speak a little bit about what is available for new staff members over there?
Sure. So as you can see, there's a bunch of different clubs available here. What's really nice, I think, about this is that you get a chance to meet colleagues from the IAEA outside of your department. I think that we can all agree that at times we get so kind of buried in our work that we kind of silo ourselves within our departments. And these clubs really help us break outside and meet somebody from, a different department, and also from other VIC organizations. So UNIDO, UNODC. And it's a really great kind of aspect to add a social item to your life. As previously mentioned, a lot of them are not functioning as normal in COVID times. But I have to say, we have a creative group here. So the runners, for example, are still managing to do some social distance meetups. We've also transitioned to kind of an app-based meetup system. So everyone does the runs on their own, but we share it using an app. And it's a nice way to kind of maintain a semblance of normalcy and kind of community throughout this COVID time. Some of the clubs that are super popular with Americans, first is the ski club. So we're in Austria. This is the skiing capital of the world. You definitely have to try it at least once while you're here. And the IAEA ski club makes it super easy. So a lot of their clubs are weekend based. You can bring your family, so you can sign up your spouse and your kids. And a lot of times they organize the bus for you. You bring your stuff, your ski stuff to work on Friday, and you leave right after work. Everything is organized, and they do a pretty good job at keeping it cost effective too. Compared to the US, it's actually very cheap to go skiing here. Another one that's super popular is the Whiskey Club. I'm not a member, so I can't speak too much about it, but I know a lot of Americans enjoy that. And then also very popular is the Sailing Club, which I found surprising, as Austria is famously a landlocked country, and they have not had a port since the Sound of Music era. But a lot of colleagues say that this is actually a really great opportunity to see some of the neighboring countries. So I know last year they did a trip right before COVID times to Croatia and made use of some of the beautiful coastlines that we have around Austria.
Lisa, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just want to add, the hiking club is the club that I belong to. And what all that Reagan said about meeting people, they have both weeknight hikes in the summertime when the days are longer. And they have some local guides who will take you on hikes, and they'll send you the information ahead of time. But it's just a delight to be able to leave work on a Wednesday in the summer, meet your hiking group, hike for a couple hours, and then go to a local little, it's not a cafe, but it's the Hörige, for some local food and wine or beer.
Yeah, I think these clubs serve a huge function because you have people coming from all over the world. They don't have any other family members in Vienna besides their immediate family. So, and they don't really know any other people. So this is a great outlet, a great way to meet other people, to build community, to meet friends that you normally wouldn't, that work outside of your division, department, or whatever, or the organization. So, and who knows, you might even meet your spouse there. I have to admit, I got to know my current wife through the ski club, and she worked in Vienna at the time. So you never know what might happen by taking part in some of these clubs. All right, so one last item here I just wanted to touch on is regarding the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program. In light of many events worldwide that are taking place, This is a free service that is provided by the U.S. State Department that you can receive if you enroll. You can receive important information about safety conditions. Vienna is a safe city, so it's really not often you have to worry about it. Unfortunately, for those that don't know, there was a terrorist attack shooting. I think it was late 2020. Is by far not the norm in Vienna. It's very unheard of, but it did happen. So this is something that they encourage, the U.S. mission, the State Department encourages any Americans who are going to live in Vienna, not just travel, but to live there, to enroll for. This is a great way for the U.S. Embassy to help contact you in case of these emergencies, or also it could be other events, natural disasters. Vienna is not a hurricane-prone or tornado-prone place, but you never know. If there are family emergencies as well, not only of here in Austria, but perhaps back in the United States. So here's the link to the website where you can enroll, and they highly encourage you to do so. All right, so that concludes the majority of our presentation today, our webinar. I want to thank our speakers for that. Now I will go over now to some of the questions that were posed in the chat box. One of them was about dogs and cats, and yes, this webinar is being recorded. We had a question about prescriptions, which we touched on as well. And Reagan, you said you did have a bicycle or your bike. Did you get your bike in Vienna or did you bring it with you?
So I would recommend buying it here. I think unless you have a really specialized road bike that you would not want to part with, bikes here are fairly cheap. The city has so many of them that it kind of drives the price down. You can buy a pretty good quality bike secondhand for probably €100 or so. But they also have some really great cycling culture here. So there's specialized road bikes if that's what you're looking for too. I do know some people that have shipped their bikes here from the States, and they said the hassle wasn't worth it in the end because there's such great quality here.
Okay, great. Did you have to register the bike? Is it recommended? Do you have, I mean, what kind of regulations are there in place if you have a bike?
I don't know the answer on regulations. I have not registered anything to date, but I will quickly Google that after this webinar to find out if I've missed some important paperwork.
Thanks. All right.
I bought a bike there and I had to register it. They just had me fill out a quick little form, and it's only in the case that it gets stolen. It goes to the police department. Right. It was pretty simple.
Yeah, and make sure you have a bell. You have to have your lights. There are dedicated bike paths for everybody, and if you are walking, get them, you definitely hear the bell, or for somebody else to get out of the way. So they have the right of way there. None of you have a car, so you probably did not get your driver's license changed or anything, did you?
I ended up doing it. My husband's Austrian, and so it just made sense, as sometimes I do drive, you know, or my mother-in-law's car or so. It's recommended to do it after 6 months of living here. That being said, I know many people that have done it 2 years after or even later. You risk a fine if you don't do it within the first 6 months. But it's a trade-off because they do take your US driver's license and you do not see it again. I think they actually send it to your home state, and then the authorities dispose of it in a timely fashion. So it's a bit of a pain, I have to say. The second part is I had never driven a manual car before, and that's something you definitely have to learn how to do, unless you're willing to pay 3 to 4 times the rental car prices for an automatic. It is a lot more expensive. So maybe get some practicing in before you come over.
And what was the process for getting a driver's license? Do you still start by going to the general services area in management in the department there?
There's 2, as I understand it, 2 government agencies that kind of oversee this. Or you can start from square one as well and go to a driver's school. If you want to kind of have a holistic experience of learning how to drive on the roads here and make sure you really understand all of the signage and everything in German. But that's not necessary. You can also just go and kind of do the bureaucratic paperwork. You fill out one form. The place I went to spoke fairly good English and was very patient with my broken German. And it kind of took, I think the whole process took 3 to 4 weeks. And then I was able to get my Austrian driver's license.
Okay, great. All right, so just looking through the questions here. There was a question here about any provisions for a spouse to continue work at a U.S. government position, like a secure workplace. Does anybody have a spouse that still works for U.S. government or has? I'll take that as a no. So unfortunately we don't have a question about that. Whoever posted that question, if you want to email me afterwards, we can try to find a little more information about that. So there's a question here is, are there couples who are working at the IAEA and also a foreign service officer at the US Embassy? Anybody working US government? No. Another question that can be posed over to myself afterwards. All right. Now, there was also a question about security clearances. I can answer this one. The IAEA does not require security clearances to work at the IAEA. If you are coming from US government and you do have a security clearance, that's something you probably want to look into as far as how long that is good for. After you received it. That's always a question that comes up. At a lot of places, it might not be extended, so you have to go through the process of getting it reinstated after returning back to the United States. Is there any school assistance service at the VIC? Does the IE provide any information prior to going to Vienna about schools, or is this something you had to do on your own? I think Lisa and Michael, you probably could answer that best.
Yeah, I did it on my own.
Yeah, same with me. I don't remember any resources about schools.
Okay, that's fine. So we have some information at Brookhaven. I believe Argonne does as well. So if you have anybody who's going over to Vienna, feel free to contact our offices, and we can provide you some information about that. So we have a question here. So my spouse is likely to come 4 to 6 months after I arrive in Vienna. Can that person delay the shipment of the furniture and items for 4 to 6 months?
Yes.
So-
It's in the first 6 months is when you have to have the shipment, but up to that first 6 months.
Okay, so that would be a yes. You can definitely delay shipment any items. So if you have family that's going to be staying back, you can let them do the packing while you go to Vienna and find a place to live. So, so those that don't have a Austrian driver's license, have any of you rented a car before?
Yes. Yeah, I've rented a car and I haven't had any problems renting a car.
Okay. What did you use when you went to get the rental? Did you show your United States driving license, or did you have to get an international permit, or what was the process?
So I just show my Washington, D.C. Driver's license and the legitimation card. And sometimes, of course, they're like confused, like, why do you have a legitimation card? And then also, but then I haven't had any problems. And we have rented a car all the way until this year. So I haven't had any problems. So
the legitimation card, those that are familiar, that is a residency permit that the IAEA arranges with the Austrian Interior Ministry for all residents that are working at the IAEA. All right, so here's a good one for you, Marina. Are there challenges to giving birth to a child in Vienna?
So I'm about to give birth to a child in 9 weeks or less, I think. But there are not any challenges. And honestly, I think I have found it a little bit easier here. Again, this is my first child, but it has been really easy. The doctors are highly available. I had some complications earlier, but there hasn't been any challenges. And in case there's always a lot of resources, there's private hospitals, which are really good. The doctors are really good, and when you get pregnant, you get a mother kinder pass, which just follows you everywhere through your appointments. It's very streamlined. And earlier, before, because we're planning going back to the US and having the child there, but it was just much easier here. So there has not been any challenges. I'll update you after the child is here.
Okay. So I did not give birth to a child, but my wife gave birth to both my kids in Vienna. So I can, from my experience, it's very, very straightforward and easy. We went to a private hospital. So you have the Austrian social system. They have all the public hospitals, and there's also private hospitals. The one that we chose, it felt like a hotel. It was so very nice. My wife was able to stay multiple days. You don't have quite the quick turnover that you typically have, like if you're giving birth in the United States, from my perspective, from what I recall. And about the Mutterkind Pass. That was perfect. It has all the vaccinations. It's basically a little booklet that you carry around for all your doctor's appointments prior and before and during having children. That really has everything very nicely organized. So, and also, I don't know about prices in the United States for giving birth, but it's much more reasonable in Austria too. All right, so the last one I have here is about the bilingual or national schools. So I know we talked about earlier about the international schools and kind of briefly about the Austrian schools. There are bilingual schools in Vienna as well. Mother tongue does need to be in English, but there has to be, I believe, some proficiency is somewhat in German as well. I don't think they allow any kids who are only German or only English and coming in with no German whatsoever. Does anybody have any kids that are in the Austrian schools or bilingual? Lisa, I see your hand.
Yeah, so I was just also going to say, it wasn't mentioned earlier, but there's a lycée, so a French school. And unfortunately, we didn't look at it. Our kids are fluent in French. But just to add in that at Vienna International School, there is a mother tongue program. So again, if you decide to go to one of the international schools and want to have a child keep up with a mother tongue that's not English, then there are those options. It's almost like an after-school club. You pay a fee. And if it is actually your mother tongue, you can get reimbursed. I found that out when I tried to get reimbursed for the boys' French. And since our mother tongue is English, we don't get it, but it's okay because they're keeping their French alive. So it's fine.
Right. Maikael, you said you had your kids in the American International School. Are they learning German, though, outside?
Yeah, so I think it's very similar at all the international schools, but there is some amount of German that is given as part of the normal curriculum. So like my daughter receives German for about an hour, like every other day, basically. So, to supplement that, and she was in purely learning in Spanish before we moved here. So we have supplemented that. There's like Spanish language institutes in town, where you can go and send your kids and do mother tongue that way. So there's certainly like a lot of different options. But yeah, we really think it's important, to try to get into the culture as much as possible. So we have our daughter signed up for like ice skating lessons, for example, with just like normal kids from Vienna. And those are great opportunities to just pick up German like very quickly.
Thank you. Now, just last thing I want to point out here on this slide with the photos, there is a Vienna football team, American football on the bottom left. They are called the Vienna Vikings. So if somebody really wants to see some live football action, though I shouldn't say it could happen in the pandemic, but there is American football in Vienna.
There's also baseball.
I know, I used to play.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are, besides some of the clubs that are at the VIC, there are outside. So anybody like softball, baseball, kids, there are different programs available. So there's lots of opportunities for different sports, for other activities outside of the VIC and outside of work. So take advantage of it. Okay, so that is all we have today for our webinar presentation. Thank you very much, Lisa, Reagan, Rebecca, Maikael, and Marina for participating today. I thank also all the participants, all our attendees who tuned in to listen. Hopefully we didn't take too much of your time. We have a lot of good information for you. If there are any other follow-up questions, please contact our office at Brookhaven or also the IE Programs Office at Argonne if you have anything that's not covered that you'd like some more information on. And yeah, that's all I have. So thank you very much, everybody, for participating, and I wish you all a good rest of your day.